we'll be focusing on what waste is, the importance of reusables and how recycling works, how COVID-19 impacted waste and plastics, where to recycle alternative items, what is considered organic or compostable, why you should be choosing between biodegradables and why you shouldn't be choosing them, and lastly, but very importantly, environmental racism. Let's get started. So what is waste? I'm pretty sure all of us know, but waste is basically unwanted materials and objects that people have thrown away. This includes unwanted or old food, paper, broken furniture, used containers, and other materials. They come out from different places like your home, your school, work, malls, things like that. Something that's very important to go through is the hierarchy of needs, and that's this little image here. So it highlights the practice of using what you have, borrowing and swapping rather than purchasing. Buying should be the last item on the list of choices you need to make to manage your own waste production. So you can use this hierarchy while making a big decision, such as buying a new outfit. It saves you a lot of money and helps you choose what you need rather than what you want. And that's why the biggest section of the pyramid is using what you have, because that's the first thing you should be doing before you buy something. So let's go through the difference between garbage, recycling, and organics. So garbage is usually items that are too broken to reuse or fix, or items marked disposable or non-reusable, as well as anything that has been used with like toxic chemicals, stuff like that. Recycling tends to be hard plastic items, metal or glass, as well as paper, cardboard, and paper and cardboard. Broken glass, however, cannot be recycled because obviously it's not able to be remolded. If you can, in the chat, you can give us an example of each type of material if you want to. So the importance of recycling. So the waste items that we fail to recycle end up in landfills. The materials in the landfill release harmful chemicals and greenhouse gases. The more waste that we divert from the landfill, the less harmful gases we emit, and that's why we should be recycling properly. So let's go through the life cycle of your plastic bottle if it were to be recycled properly. So first, it would be collected at your curbside or apartment. It would then be transported to a material recovery facility. And these materials are then unloaded onto a very big conveyor belt. They are first sorted by the workers in the facility. So they first sort manually to remove any non-recyclable materials. And that's like food and stuff like that, any tainted paper, anything like that, that could ruin the batch. And then down the line of the conveyor belt, they go through optical sensors and magnetic different recyclable items. So that's plastics, metals, glass, and paper. All these materials then travel down the conveyor belt into separate categories, into the respective categories. And then they go one of two ways. They are either converted into a raw material commodity and shipped off to end markets, or they are recycled into new products. So that could be into furniture, car bumpers, or shelving, or they can actually also be converted back to a plastic bottle. So depending on what the market is for that item. Next, let's talk about the top recycling offenders. So the top one right now is food and organic waste, and that's usually in the containers that we throw out into the recycling, especially if we have eaten in them, stuff like that. So that's containers with leftover foods, clothing, and textiles. And that one is an offender because usually they get stuck into the conveyor belts at the recycling facilities, and they're also non-recyclable. Hot beverage cups, and the reason why they are not recyclable is because the beverage cup is lined with a wax lining on the inside, and it's very thin, so you can't really separate it out. Black plastics and hoses and electrical cords. And hoses and electrical cords are also non-recyclable, also because of the fact that they can actually get stuck into the conveyor belts as well. Next. So the effect on plastics from COVID-19. So plastics have been an issue since they were created. They are meant to be convenient and easier to acquire for the problem itself. COVID-19 has not helped with our plastics problem. Although keeping safe and healthy is top priority, we should also still have our planet in mind. And we should also be listening to the research. And the research says that the virus lasts 72 hours on plastics, while it lasts only 24 hours on fabric, cardboard, and paper. Quit your plastics problem and join the reusable movement. And that means stop using the Walmart bags that they are giving out. Disposable masks and gloves are not so great for the environment, especially when thrown on the floor is carried into sewers and out into the waters. Masks and gloves may appear to look like jellyfish to turtles and will actually harm them because they'll try to eat them. So try to keep them off the floor in garbage cans. So I basically found a few statistics for the city of Toronto, and what it said was that we're actually wasting less. So we're wasting less by 17% in the city of Toronto. And one question that I did get a lot how hospitals are doing because of all their masks that are being used. However, hospitals are actually using way less masks right now. They're using less personal protective equipment because they're generating less due to not having a lot of elective surgeries being done. So we're wasting a lot less. In New Brunswick as well, the same trend is occurring. Less waste is being sent to the landfills, and that's from the Fredericton region solid waste. And they're actually wasting 2/3 less waste from March until May. And the reason for that was because businesses are actually closed, and that's where most of the waste was being generated. And a helpful tip that was actually brought up is due to COVID-19, to keep employees safe from storing any items that may have bodily fluids on it, it's recommended that everyone places their facial tissues, paper towels, and paper napkins into the garbage until further notice, and that's to keep employees safe. Below you might find your region or city, and basically what these are, we're only focusing on the GTA for now, but we have the waste wizards connected to all of these regions. And if you wanted to get a link to those, you can write your city or region into the chat. I can give you the link for that. A very neat tool that there is for the City of Toronto and region of Durham. They have applications on the App Store and the Google Play for waste wizards. So for the City of Toronto, it's called Waste TO. So if you type that into your phone, it'll pop up. And you can basically write in any item that you have at your home that you don't know where it belongs, and it'll tell you where to go. And for Durham, it's the Durham Region Waste app. And it's the same exact concept. So considering that the regions are not actually collecting batteries, we found other ways to recycle it. So for battery and cell phone recycling, you can actually recycle it through most hardware stores, such as Home Depot, Rona, Lowe's, and Canadian Tire. I found this very neat little website called calltorecycle.org. And basically, you just type in your postal code, and it can find a recycling bin near you. I would obviously call beforehand just to double check if they're still doing it. Clothing and fabric are a very tricky item to deal with, especially considering if it's improperly recycled, like we said before, it can actually shut down recycling plants. Actually donate your clothing or your fabrics to Value Village. They are actually open and collecting right now. Your computers and screens, anything that you need to recycle, like e-waste, can be taken to a Best Buy, and once again, you should call for availability. If you found any other solution to these problems, you can write them down in the chat as well, just to give everyone else some ideas too. So we'll move on to the next stream. So what is organic? The main items that belong to the organics are fruits and vegetables, meat, poultry, and mainly the things that we always eat, basically, or anything from the earth. One thing that is very important to note is animal waste was written in the list. But it's something to double check about, because you're not allowed to put clay litter, sand litter, or clumping litter for cat waste, as well as scented litter, because they don't actually get composted. It's too hard to compost. And one thing that's super important to talk about is the reusable, degradables, and why they don't actually get composted. So that's in the next slide. So biodegradables may seem like the better option to choose from. However, biodegradable items have a complicated relationship with composting. To understand it better, you must know what the process of composting is in this facility. So since we're focusing on the city of Toronto, I used it as an example. So in Toronto, we use anaerobic digestion, which basically they take all of our organic waste and place it into an oxygen-free environment. And take it to a machine called the hydropulper. And this machine it's a huge machine that has water and a huge clawing arm that whirls the liquids and organic items that residents have recycled. Items that are very light in weight, such as plastic bags, diapers, and compostable straws or forks, end up floating and being shredded by the clawing arm and then taken to a landfill. Items that are heavier in weight, that are improperly recycled, like glass, metals, or anything other like that type of material, will end up at the bottom of the basin and also taken. So anything improperly composted, basically. So with that, most biodegradable items don't get chosen with this machine, so they end up floating and end up in the landfill. So using reusables has more benefits than we let on. It saves recycling plants from having to pick through bags. It saves the hydropulper machine from using energy to pick out the wrong types of organics placed in the bins, as well as saving energy creating the plastics or biodegradable items you're choosing to use. Next. So next we have a very you have to cover, obviously, with being environmental stewards. It's environmental racism and the inequalities of landfills. So a topic that is overlooked at times is the inequality within environmental policies, and that's not towards the environment, but those actually living in it. A study done in Nova Scotia showed that there are inequities towards the Mi'kmaq community, as well as the African Nova Scotian community. Landfills are located closer to regions where their communities are residing, and that's no mistake. Environmental racism refers to environmental policies, practices, or disproportionately disadvantage individuals, groups, or communities based on race or color. Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are much closer to areas with high rates of pollution and water contamination. With the Enrich project, they actually created an ArcGIS map where you can place layers for communities of Aboriginal communities, African Nova Scotian communities, how close they are to a waste facility or toxic water facility, or even I forgot the other layer. But as you can see from the screenshot I took, the landfills are placed very closely to the communities, and that's shown by the rings of the distance. This is a tactic of environmental racism that uses spatial relations of domination and spatial forms of structural inequalities of violence. This concept of spatial inequalities highlights the ways in which hierarchies of race, class, and other social identities are imbued in the places and spaces where we live, work, and play. If you would like the link to this project, you can write it down in the chat. And lastly, what you can do for the environment. You can continue to use reusable items whenever you can. You can work on creating DIY masks. You can educate yourself and your peers on environmental policies in your region and province. You can sign petitions to pressure your government to address environmental racism. You can participate in community cleanups, and if there aren't any right now, you can totally do it yourself. And you can create a waste guide on how to recycle properly for your household. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Safa. I would like to encourage all of our viewers at this time to make note of our social media handles. I'll include them in the chat as well. I'd like to encourage all of you to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's Sustain Humber and Best Service Pros. We're happy to answer any of the questions that we're not going to get to today. If that's the case, any questions you may have in the future, or if you just want to hear about sustainability initiatives going on campus, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. So now, Safa, you have quite a few questions here in the chat, which is great. So before we begin the Q&A, I would just like to mention that if you want to ask your question directly to Safa, please just indicate so with the raise hand option on the toolbar. But for now, our first question. So going back to slide 7, I'm not sure, Safa, if you want to go back to slide 7 or if you remember what was on that slide. But someone is asking, isn't plastic downcycled more than recycled? So if you just want to touch on that again.
1 second. So that is actually a very good question, which I did look into before. So plastics, because of their very complex, basically chemical bonding, the more times that you recycle it, the less their quality becomes. So that is true. It does get downcycled very fast, which is why we encourage using reusables rather than plastics.
Perfect. Our second question. You mentioned black plastic as an issue for waste, but then just a general plastics term for acceptable. Can you break down the acceptable plastics more, like plastic sandwich bags versus soft plastic containers versus hard containers? Can anything plastic with a recycle symbol and number be recycled? So feel free to touch on this question. If not, we can reach out to this individual afterwards.
For sure. So plastics that are, so let's say saran wrap, which is very thin and very stretchy, that one doesn't actually get recycled, but I think also the sandwich bags don't get recycled either. So it's mostly the recyclables that are from number 1 to 6, I believe, but it does change for different municipalities and cities. And that's why it's best to use the Waste Wizard tool for your own city just to figure that out.
Perfect. Our third question. Do you know if the Ontario government is looking at creating a standard recycling list for Ontario, since different municipalities have different rules on what is and what is not accepted?
For sure. I actually will link that in the chat. So the Stewardship Ontario is working with the Blue Box program to ensure approval for creating products that are recyclable. Instead of municipalities having to use taxpayer dollars to actually deal with that, I will link that in the chat right now, and you can take a look at that.
Perfect. We have just one last question, unless anybody would like to ask their question directly to Safa, and please do so by the raise hand. Actually, we have quite a few more questions. So the one that I was talking about before. Okay, so how exactly does Humber dispose the waste? I know other schools use a private waste company which makes the materials at the school, except different than in the municipality it's in. So if you just want to talk about how Humber does their recycling program and waste.
For sure. So we actually did visit the facility where we do, the recycling facility that Humber uses, which is Canada Fibers. So basically, they take the recycling from our school or our college, and they take it to the facility and they sort it the way that I was basically saying in the presentation, which is manual sorting and then through magnetic sorters and optical sensors. It's the City of Toronto, I think it's under City of Toronto, so if you do use the Waste.to app, you'll actually find exactly what you need to recycle properly in. But that is how they do it. You're muted.
I knew that was going to happen to me at least once. Next question, are there any projects that address environmental racism in Canada that you know of?
I did. I actually have a link that I had written down. I will find it and I will send it in the chat right after.
Okay. Then I'm going to combine two questions that we have here. One individual is wondering how they can get rid of their 2 tires they have in their garage, and another individual is asking how batteries are recycled.
For sure. Let me see that. So one thing that you can do for tire recycling is actually searching earth911.com, which actually has recycling locators. You can also search it up in your Waste Wizard, and you can take it to the CRC at your city, basically, and they can dispose of it for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Safa.
And for battery recycling, let's see.
We have more questions coming in. This is great. Do you want me to move on to the next question, Safa? And
Yeah, I'll come back to that one.
Okay. Where do disposable packaging and foodware, where do disposable packaging and foodware is necessary? Does Humber have any official preference for either compostable plastics or oil-based plastics?
I think Humber right now would rather, actually, I'm not too sure, because we usually say not to use compostables because of the fact that it'll end up in landfills.
Right.
But I feel like that would be the better way to go from oil-based plastics. But always use reusables when you can.
Great. And Taylor has just linked the TO Waste app for those that are interested in downloading it as well. Perfect. So I think you've answered all the questions. And you did an awesome job answering those. Thank you so much, Safa.
Thank you.
We'll pass it over to Taylor now.
Taylor, you're muted.
I'm on mute too. Yes. Figured it out. Yes, I will share it for the app store as well. Sorry about that, but it is called the TO Waste app. So maybe not just the TO app. So we can get that for you too. There was just one more question, Safa, if that's okay,
Yeah.
and I can ask it. Thank you, Claire, for handling the chat and getting all those questions down. So it's just last year there were new waste recycling organics bins placed at Lakeshore campus. Yeah, that was great. I noticed that. So are there plans to add organic bins to North Campus? If you can share a little bit.
Yes, actually. So basically, we just implemented all of that at Lakeshore, and the next step is to add it to North. So that's really exciting. All the new bins that we saw at Lakeshore are actually also being brought into North. So you will see that when hopefully Humber opens up again after COVID-19. So that will be there. Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you so much, Safa. If there's any other questions, you can feel free to jump in now, or we will definitely share Safa's email. Sorry, there is one more question too, so we'll ask that, which is just great. Keep them coming. So someone's just saying they had a bit of technical difficulties, so apologies if this was already mentioned. But has Humber been coordinating with, or has Humber been coordinating at all with local reuse initiatives like repair cafes and tool libraries?
Taylor, can you answer this question? I think you would know more. about this?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like I could probably answer this question. So, yes, but not in a long-term sense at the moment. Is definitely something we were hoping to look into a bit more. We've had just sort of kind of one-off events where we would have someone come in for repairing kind of sewing items and going through your clothing items. And so far, nothing with tool libraries. But hopefully that's something we can look at more even when campus is safe to go back to. I know for our office, we were planning kind of a whole reusable sale. Pretty much it was going to be office supplies and everything that were donated by people at Humber Community. And unfortunately, it was planned right for when the college shut down. So when we go back, I have an office full of binders and notebooks if anyone is in need, or anyone can point me in the direction of students in need. But those are definitely some initiatives that we're going to keep in mind as we learn more about kind of what returning to campus will look like. So I hope that answers your question. So at the moment, no, but we're working on it. Okay, great. So if that's it for questions for our live webinar now. I just want to say thank you again, Safa, for being here and for presenting. It was really informative. A lot of people don't know kind of the behind the scenes of what actually happens with waste. So I definitely encourage everyone, if you have any further questions, we'll share Safa's email in the chat. So that you can reach out to her directly. And that might be a good way, especially I know there's the battery question still maybe we're wondering about. So we will reach out to you about that. Just lastly, before everyone heads off, we're going to give you the gift of some of your time back if there's no further questions. Safa has put together a very short survey that we would love if you were able to fill out after the webinar. So that'll give you a bit more specific information about your region where you live, and Safa will be reaching out kind of with your scores afterwards to see how well you're doing in your region with your waste knowledge. So Claire will be sharing that in the chat, and if you could just take a few minutes to fill that out, we would really appreciate it.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone again. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we'll just share. Safa, would you mind sharing your email in the chat?
Yep.
And please reach out to Safa or reach out to us at Sustain Humber, humber.ca/sustainability for any more information that you need. Awesome. Great, thank you, Safa. Thanks, everyone.